I want to step back for a minute and have a broader look at the pay gap. Because there's loads of research on this here and in the US and UK, where the gap is 23% and 17% respectively. But there's no definitive answer and there's no simple explanation. It seems likely that only actually a very small part of the gap is due to flat-out overt sexism. You know, that is a manager deciding to pay someone less because she's female. That's illegal, of course, but it's only detectable where there's an award rate or in salaried positions where it's stated explicitly that that's the reason. So it probably does happen, but rarely. We know that a largest part of the gap is due to informal caregiving, which is still overwhelmingly women's work. And I'll speak a little bit about that later on, but I'm not only talking about childcare, although that's a huge part of it, but other forms of unpaid care, such as elder care and caring for disabled family members. Around 70% of Australia's 2.6 million family carers are women, and the majority of those women hold down paid jobs in addition to their unpaid caring duties. Now, of course, time spent caring in the home means less time in the workplace, which, although it may well mean women work more hours in total, still translates to a lower income. Note also that the figures I'm using here are based on full-time work. So the difference caused by fewer hours at work is due to men being able to put in more hours and do overtime rather than women working part-time or casual jobs. On a related note, there's the fact that many of our lowest paid professions are dominated by female workers: nursing, teaching, retail, cleaning, paid child or elder care. Another contributor to the pay gap problem, but one that mostly operates in higher status white-collar jobs, has to do with negotiation. The US academics Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashiva recently published their research on women and pay negotiation in a book unambiguously titled "Women Don't Ask." I'll quote from their findings. By not negotiating a first salary, an individual stands to lose more than $500,000 by age 60, and men are more than 4 times as likely as women to negotiate a first salary rather than simply accept what was offered. So the straightforward solution would seem to be to tell young women starting out in the workforce to ask for more money. Except no. Babcock and Lashiva also found that many companies' cultures penalise women when they do ask, further discouraging them from doing so. Women who assertively pursue their own ambitions and promote their own interests will be labelled as bitchy or pushy as troublemakers. There are a couple of other recent studies that back up this research. Catalyst in the US found that most senior level executives believed women were better at stereotypically feminine caretaking skills, and men were better at stereotypically masculine taking charge skills. In other words, men are better at managing and women are better at supporting them. In addition, the male executives, but not the females, said that women are better problem solvers than men. And as the report pointed out, as most senior managers at the moment are men, their bias is likely to have a stronger hold on workplace culture. A 2006 report by the US National Academy of Sciences came to a similar conclusion, finding that women are underrepresented in top positions in the academy and in their professions, not because of a lack of talent, but because of unintentional biases and outmoded institutional structures. This study noted that continuous questioning of women's abilities and commitment and the rewarding of traits such as assertiveness that are socially less acceptable for women to possess were common. And this last point is really interesting in light of some research into workplace harassment from the University of Toronto. This study found that women who display masculine traits, which are apparently assertiveness, independence and ambition, were more likely to be targets of workplace harassment. The findings actually contradict the common advice given to women entering male-dominated industries to adopt the behaviour and style of their colleagues. The research suggests that such cultures penalise feminine women with a lack of workplace recognition and promotion, and they punish masculine women with harassment. So what does a woman who just wants to do a damn job and get paid fairly do? If she senses the unspoken rule that women shouldn't be, as the Canadian study put it, uppity, she might attempt to be less confrontational, more conciliatory. She might follow the advice of the former Sex Discrimination Commissioner, now New South Wales MP Prue Goward, whose advice was to work on making her voice less shrill. But then being less shrill and quietly spoken, she may give her male colleagues the impression that she's not serious and not leadership material. Their perception that this is generally the way women are will be reinforced. The next woman who acts uppity will suffer the consequences of bucking cultural expectations. So, back to Edith, who's concluded, unsurprisingly, that there's nothing she can do but continue to work harder and smarter than everyone else. Take on extra assignments, help colleagues with their workload, volunteer for committees, attend networking events, self-fund extra study. Eventually, surely, she'll be rewarded. And it starts to work. She begins, finally, after almost a decade, to make some progress. And then she discovers she's pregnant. But this is fantastic news, because she's almost 30, and as the newspapers, current affairs shows, women's magazines and world telling her, women who leave it too long to get pregnant will end up barren and heartbroken. She sits down with her partner to talk about how they'll split the childcare. And he's really keen to take on an equal share of the parenting. But the thing is, she's entitled to maternity leave. And unlike 53% of Australian women, she'll even get paid for some of it. Her partner, on the other hand, while legally entitled to some paternity leave, can't be said to have easy, uncomplicated access to it. No man at his company has ever taken more than a week off for the birth of the kids. He doesn't see why he should be the one to set a precedent when she can take the leave without comment and with pay. So there's not really an argument here. Edith will be responsible for the bulk of the caring for their child for at least the first 12 months, which isn't really a problem. I mean, as the parent who will be physically giving birth and the one with the capacity to breastfeed, she's more likely to need that first year off than her partner. So she takes 12 months leave. But then what? The cost of good childcare is frightening, and the thought of leaving the baby in dodgy, cheap care is unbearable. Difficult decisions have to be made. Now, I strongly believe that how parents organise their family life is none of anyone else's damn business, and that decisions about managing childcare and careers should always be made by the adults involved according to what is best for their family. But I do think it's worth talking about the context in which people make these decisions. When I was researching my latest book, I talked to a whole bunch of highly educated professional women. I went along to their mothers group. There was one father, but it was a mothers group, as they called it. They'd all given up work after the baby was born. Many of them told me that they didn't work outside the home anymore because their after-tax salary would barely cover the cost of full-time childcare. It's not worth it, they all told me. Now, I don't know exactly how much these women or their husbands earned, but it became very quickly obvious that they weren't deducting half or indeed any of the childcare cost from their husband's salary. So the calculation seemed to be women's salary minus childcare equals might as well stay home. But shouldn't it be family income minus childcare equals new family income if we both decide to continue working? An article about working mothers, which appeared in The Age around the time I was doing the research for this book in 2006, had the same weird blind spot. The article thoroughly examined the various reasons women give for returning to full or part-time work or staying home with their children, but their partners were mentioned only in passing. And the article included breakout boxes with breakdowns of the four mothers' featured financial situations, and it included income, less tax, travel costs and childcare costs. Income earned by the fathers was conspicuously absent from the equations in every case. The unspoken assumption throughout was that childcare is a woman's responsibility, whether she's doing the caring herself or hiring someone else to do it. This whole work childcare discussion too often rests on the flawed premise that only women have children. But most people are or will be parents. It's ridiculous that most workplaces are structured as though nobody is a parent. And many public institutions, particularly schools, are structured as though no parent has a job. And whenever an argument is made for better parental leave provisions or increased work hour flexibility or subsidised childcare, we get the same old horror-struck responses. The economy will suffer, businesses will collapse, companies will stop hiring women at all, a generation of delinquents will run wild while their mothers are off pursuing their careers. As though these selfish, greedy women are ruining it for everybody. But, and this needs to be repeated until everyone gets it, men are parents too. If they're not as concerned about juggling childcare and work as women are, they should be. If they're not held as responsible for their children's welfare as women are, they should be. And those who, like me, aren't parents and don't intend to be, need to recognise that the children of our colleagues will one day be our employees, our politicians, economists, plumbers, teachers and doctors. That an investment in their upbringing and future is an investment in our future. Again, family planning, private issue. But the construction of a society that makes it difficult for the majority of parents to manage work and family responsibilities is a matter of public concern. A study out of Monash University in 2004 titled What Women and Men Want, Births, Policies and Choices concluded that while government or workplace policies didn't singularly influence the decisions couples made about fertility, they did form the landscape in which women and men negotiated their choices about families, work and life. According to the authors of that report, many women ended up lowering their expectations about what both governments and employers would provide in supporting their fertility decisions. Now, as anyone who's ever tried to get out of something by doing a crappy job knows, fostering low expectations is a fantastic way to ensure that not much will be asked of you in the future. If women have low expectations of their workplaces and governments, they'll struggle through on their own, not bothering to agitate or even ask for a better deal from the workplace or society. Which is exactly what Edith does. After a few years as a stay-at-home mother to her now 2 kids, who are now school age, it's not just that she misses the mental stimulation of work, though she does. She worries about money. She trusts her husband, they're happy enough. But what if something happened to him? She knows that without a job, she is, as Betty Friedan put it all those years ago, one husband away from welfare. The fear isn't an unreasonable one. American researcher Ann Crittenden contends that motherhood is the single greatest risk factor for poverty among American women. Several studies have shown that professional women who return to full-time work after a time-off period or even a period of part-time work suffer a substantial and ongoing cut in pay and responsibility. In Australia, women overall have significantly less money saved for their retirement than men. Responding to concerns about Australia's low level of women's workforce participation and earnings, which are, as you'll recall, about 84% of men's, John von Duser, the president of the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, was blunt. Women, he said, are getting punished for the simple fact that they genetically are those with the function to produce the next generation. So Edith goes back to work. It's hectic and it's hard, but that's life. Except, to make it all harder, she's still working in the same low-level position that she held before the kids were born, while those men she worked with back then are now several steps further up the ladder, and they're climbing fast. And she knows that this is fair. I mean, they've been busy climbing that ladder while she's been at home. But it frustrates her that on their desks are pictures of their own gorgeous, well-cared-for, much-loved children. These men, once her contemporaries, earn more, have more superannuation, better future career earning prospects than she does, and they have kids too. How did it happen that they ended up having it all? Parenthood and a successful career, while she couldn't? The answer comes to her. These men have wives. Edith wonders if this is where she went wrong. She became a wife instead of getting one. But no, it probably went wrong a long time before that, back at school, in fact, when she accepted the glib statement that girls can do anything boys can do. She accepted that and she went forward as if it was true. She never worried about how gendered assumptions operating in the workplace or in wider society might affect her. Because we're living in post-feminist times. And yes, she has had many choices that women of previous generations have not had. And yes, it's true, she loves being a mother. She doesn't for 1 second regret that. But the fact remains, the context in which she made those choices, made all her choices, was very different to that of those boys she started off as perfectly equal to. It takes life to make a feminist. It's important to me to acknowledge here that Edith is, as I said right at the start of her story, about as privileged as a woman gets in this world. Her life experience has been an easy ride compared to that of many women. And I'm not just talking about those in overtly repressive societies where girls are routinely mutilated and women stoned. I'm not just talking in comparison to women in developing nations where lack of basic healthcare creates unbelievably high maternal death rates. But compared to many women right here in Australia, she's had an easy life. For example, the many Indigenous women in remote communities who struggle daily to keep themselves and their children safe from violence and struggle for basic access to housing, education, employment and healthcare. Female immigrants and refugees who, although often located in urban areas, also struggle because of language, cultural and sometimes economic barriers to access those same most basic services. And both of those groups have their difficulties compounded often by racism. I'm talking about the many women in low-paid, so-called unskilled jobs who don't have access to sick pay or even untimed toilet breaks, let alone paid maternity leave. Or same-sex attracted women who face both officially sanctioned discrimination and societal homophobia. Women with disabilities who deal with a whole world of issues to do with bodily autonomy, healthcare and access to education and employment. And the point isn't that all of these women's problems are caused by sexism. It's that sexism hurts everybody. And it hurts minorities, the marginalised and the otherwise disadvantaged the most. If women like Edith are struggling with institutionalised sexism, what hope for the women who could never in a million years afford not to work, who could never afford to pay for childcare? What hope for women without the language skills or understanding of Australian bureaucracy to make an anti-discrimination complaint or negotiate better work conditions? Now, the existence of women confronting multiple injustices sometimes leads critics to accuse feminists of betraying these women by concentrating on trivialities. Stop worrying over sexist ads when you could be stopping genital mutilation, they say. This criticism is frankly bullshit. First, it's designed to make us shut up and take it. Like, as long as something worse is happening somewhere, we've got no right to complain about what is happening right in front of us. The message, crudely paraphrased, is stop bitching about petty crap, think yourself lucky you don't get beaten for leaving the house. Now, anyone who thinks women should be grateful for being treated like a human being is not on the side of social justice, I promise you. Second, the so-called little things, like sexist language or media objectification of women, create the context in which serious life-affecting oppression and injustice occur. If we want to end gender-based violence, injustice and oppression, we have to dismantle the societal structures and thought patterns that allow them to occur. It's impossible to imagine a society without domestic violence, as long as we still have a society where wives are portrayed, even in dumb ads and jokes, as the property of their husbands. It's impossible to imagine a world without female genital mutilation, as long as women's sexual autonomy is still considered threatening. So look at it this way. If you are less seriously affected by misogyny and sexism than many other women, you are in a much stronger position to do something about it. The absolute worst thing you can do is ignore sexism in your own world because you see worse examples elsewhere. The worst thing you can do is accept that sexism is okay as long as it's not the kind that ends in mutilation or death. And you know, paying attention to sexism and calling it out when we see it isn't just important if we want to see long-term worldwide change. It can actually make an immediate difference to the psychological and emotional well-being of individual women. I often hear young women, and I've probably said it myself, say something along the lines of, I just don't let sexist pigs bother me, they're ignorant dinosaurs, I ignore them. Which is a good attitude, actually. I'm all for ignoring sexist dinosaurs. The problem with it is that sexist beliefs of others hurt us the most when we don't know about them. There is actually quite a bit of research on this, but I'll just quickly run you through one study from Leiden University. The researchers set up mock job interviews during which women were asked 10 sexist questions, such as, do you sometimes dress sexily in order to get someone to do something for you? And do you think it will be difficult for you to combine a career and family? All the candidates were then rejected. One group of candidates was told they'd given the wrong answers. The other group were told that they were rejected because they were women. The women who were openly rejected on gender grounds didn't have a problem in terms of self-image. They knew that they were rejected because of their gender, not because of their skills. Their reaction, their anger and disappointment, focused on the interviewer, the perpetrator of the discrimination. But the women who were supposedly rejected because they'd given wrong answers looked for the reason for the rejection in themselves, which resulted in a low self-image. And when the researchers ran IQ tests straight after, it resulted in a poorer performance. So think about the implications. Someone discriminates against you because of your gender. You don't know that that's what's happened, so you blame yourself. Your confidence takes a knock. You perform poorly, and the perpetrator of the discrimination is justified in the initial decision that women can't perform well. And you'll probably walk away with the same idea: I suck. And this, in a nutshell, actually is why I write and speak about sexism. Not to be politically correct or looking for reasons to be upset, but about helping women direct their anger at the people or institutions that deserve it, rather than at themselves. So what do? First, we pay attention. We watch the way women or girls are treated differently to men and boys, and we ask in each instance, why? And does it matter? We listen to the stories of women, all kinds of women, with all kinds of experiences. We listen to the experiences of men, and we ask the same questions. Where does gender fit in here? Are the differences inherent or imposed? Second, we talk about the things that we've heard and observed and experienced. We tell our friends the things that bother us. We find out if they're bothered by them too. We try to discover whether our personal problems are perhaps being experienced on a wider level. And if so, why might that be? Are we all just messed up and useless at negotiating life? So we ask our friends and colleagues, is it just me? Third, we speak up. For ourselves and for other women. We speak up at uni, at school, at home. We write letters or arrange protests or start blogs or join activist organisations. We volunteer to teach migrant women English or to help out at a women's shelter or to tutor disadvantaged students. We use our money or time or skills or voices to make things better. And to help others understand how sexism works. That gender-based inequality is a systemic problem. It's not a bloke telling a sexist joke over here and a boss grabbing his secretary's ass over there. It's an institutional problem. It's endemic to the whole culture. And it will take a society-wide shift in attitudes towards gender roles to ever make a difference. Thank you very much.